Every week a team gets a W or an L. I would say this week, though, Southern's W was bigger than anyone else's. Oh, yeah. It's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now, of course, Sam Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off doesn't mean the journey's over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram. That didn't go with the rhythm, so we had to abandon that. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at _Mouth of the South so you can get daily clips, including a clip from the Kiera Wheeler interview from earlier today. You're not going to want to miss that. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at Morgan State because their win, specifically the way that they got the W, is the biggest surprise of the weekend. Eric Phoenix may not have played over the weekend, but he did play on Thursday, and I think he locked down the MEAC Offensive Player of the Year with his performance against North Carolina Central. And as we wrap up today's show with the biggest surprise of the weekend, I want to look at the biggest winners of the weekend, and that is the Southern Jaguars. If we're only focusing on Saturday's slate, right? If we're only focusing on the slate of games that was played on Saturday and abandoning South Carolina State versus North Carolina Central, of all the games played on Saturday, Southern was the biggest winners because I see a team that knocked off Alabama A&M, and then their biggest obstacle, I'm not going to say rival because that's Grambling, but the biggest obstacle fell to Alabama State. So the Southern Jaguars are the biggest winner because with 3 games left, they have essentially a 2-game lead on their biggest obstacle to win the SWAC West. The biggest obstacle is Alcorn, right? So Southern beats Alabama A&M. They go to 4-1 in conference play. Alcorn loses to Alabama State. They drop to 3-2. Here's the thing. Southern and Alcorn entered the week tied at the top of the SWAC West, but Southern had the tiebreaker because they won the head-to-head matchup, which means Alcorn has to have less losses, not the same amount, but the less losses than Southern. As we narrow down the season, it becomes less likely that Southern is going to have more losses than Alcorn. The route to the SWAC championship is simple for them. The route to the SWAC championship for the Southern Jaguars is to win 2 of your next 3 games or win a game and Alcorn loses a game. And I'm talking about at any point during the season. They could win this next game and Southern can win this next game. Southern can win this next game and Alcorn could lose the last game. If that happens and they win the other ones, Southern is your SWAC West champion, right? You're looking at Southern's schedule. The truth of the matter is, I expect this. Now, let's not tiptoe around it. With the outcome that we got this weekend, with Southern being victorious and Alcorn losing, I expect the Southern Jaguars to be your SWAC West representative in the championship game because I'm looking at Bethune-Cookman, UAPB, and Grambling. I think that they could win 1, if not 2, if not 3 of their next 3 games. But then I'm looking at Alcorn and I'm saying, I don't really need to go through the schedule. I expect them to lose to Jackson State, but they have TSU, they have PV, and then they have Jackson State. Could they win the next 2 games? Yes, but I do not think that they'll be able to get through JSU. And that's what it all comes down to. And that's why Southern is the biggest winner, because as you go through the SWAC West, if I'm not mistaken, Grambling is pretty much done for. Grambling would need everybody to lose a bunch, and then they get a tiebreaker with Southern. But Grambling has to win out. Another loss, and I think they're done, right? Because Grambling would have 3 games left. They have 4 losses. Yeah, they have 4 losses in conference play. If Southern wins one game, they can't catch Southern. It's over. You look at UAPB, Texas Southern, and the truth of the matter is, I don't think that those are real contenders right now. Like, I just think they need to be too perfect. I think that UAPB knocking off, UAPB lost this weekend, so they have 3 losses. Texas Southern lost. They have 3 losses. They would have to knock off Southern, UAPB. They would have to knock off Southern. Then Southern would have to lose another game, and UAPB would have to win out. TSU, they had 3 losses. They would have to win out, and Southern would have to lose out, or it'd have to be some sort of weird three-team tiebreaker. That doesn't even work. You can't have a tiebreaker because if it's Alcorn, Southern, and Texas Southern, Southern wins. You start going through it. We're at the point where conversations about tiebreakers and conversations about who is going to represent the division, they're important. And you go through the next 4 to 5 teams underneath Southern, it's only Alcorn that feels like they have a real chance. I don't think that UAPB is going to win out. I don't think that Texas Southern is going to win out. I think that Texas Southern could probably beat anybody on their remaining schedule without me just looking. They've already faced Jackson State. They've already faced Florida A&M. They don't have to play Alabama State. I think they could beat anybody left on their roster. They've already played Southern, right? The problem is that TSU has not shown the consistency for me to project a 3-game winning streak to close out the season. That's the problem. That is the issue. So while they could beat a bunch of teams, can they beat all of those teams that are on the schedule? I don't think so. I can't reasonably predict it. So the truth of the matter is, I know it's not as simple as win one game, they lose one, or Alcorn lose one game, you're done, because there's other teams who mathematically could do it. But if we're only speaking mathematically, I would have to include TSU and UAPB and even Grambling. I don't think any of those 3 teams are legitimate threats to catch Southern. There's one team who could do it, and that's the Alcorn State Braves. If Southern wins a game and Alcorn loses a game at any point throughout the duration of the season, or if Southern wins 2 games throughout the duration of their next 3 games, they are the SWAC West champions. And that is the simple truth of it. And it's very easy to track. So, also, let me give a shout out to the transformation that I've seen from this team. I didn't think that they would be one of those squads. I didn't. When I'm looking at Southern a month and a half, the beginning of the season, really the Savannah State game, that second game of the year, I was like, yeah, this team isn't it. And it's where I cemented my opinion on Noah Biden. I did not like him in that game. I did not think he performed well at all. It was very concerning. And I haven't seen enough consistency to change my mind. But Zae Teasett came into the game, and I felt like things changed. I felt like the offense began to flow. That offense was absolutely stagnant against Division II Savannah State. The defense was doing what they needed to do, but offensively, they were not on top of their game, and that was concerning to me. It's probably the reason that I believe in Teasett so much. But then he comes in, he gets hurt the next game, and Noah Biden comes in. So I'm really out on Southern now. But then they string together some games. Teasett comes in this one. He's the starter against Alabama A&M. And he delivers a really nice clutch throw, a nice route. I seen him talking about how he told Five, put a move and get some space. It was really good. Seeing Zae Teasett come out in just his first start that he was able to actually finish. Zae Teasett went 24 of 37, 294 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Then he added 6 carries for 57 yards on the ground. 350 and 3 touchdowns with really good efficiency through the air. I'm taking that any day of the week. I came on here last week and I said, I think that Zae Teasett gives you a higher ceiling for this year and moving forward. Toot, like, like that was so stupid. It didn't look right on camera, but yeah. Zae Teasett look good. I'm tooting my own horn. I'm patting my own back. Look, there may have been teams who had a larger margin of victory, but there is no team who had a bigger victory over the weekend. The only team you could compare them to played on Thursday, and that was South Carolina State's victory over North Carolina Central. And in that game, Eric Phoenix, the South Carolina State quarterback, in my opinion, pretty much wrote his name in pencil, even maybe pen, on the MEAC Offensive Player of the Year award. Let's break down why as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. And our friends at 5 Hour Energy know how hard it can be and how exhausting sometimes it can be to be a passionate football fan. It's not just a hobby, it's a way of life. It can affect your whole day, the day after, and the day of, sometimes even going 2, 3 days in advance, right? And it takes a lot of energy on that game day to go through tailgates, to go through touchdown celebrations, to go through a second overtime, maybe even third OT, right? We're going to see more of that with basketball season here, which is why they've created the Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel for the super fans like myself, like you. And you know what gave me a little bit of energy, gave me a little bit of fan fuel? I would say that touchdown pass from Zae Teasett, right? The one where the tight end had an arm being held back, had another arm up for the one-handed snag, brought it in for the game-winning touchdown. That gave me a little bit of fan fuel. But if you want something that can make you feel like that, all you have to do is go to 5hourenergy.com, because they know no matter what team that you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy, and they want you to be in heavy supply of that. So go get yourself some fan fuel this week, available on 5hourenergy.com, shipped nationwide. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked on Texas, right? Locked on Longhorns with my guy, Jonathan Davis, who is always putting up great content. And on Mondays, he has a fellow friend of mine, Tony Monk, on the show, breaking down the week of action. But I think they were on a bye week this week, so they'll probably preview the upcoming game. Now, the MEAC Offensive Player of the Year belongs to Eric Phoenix. Simple. After what we saw on Thursday, not only the result of the game, which was very important, but then also the individual performance by Eric Phoenix, I would say the MEAC Offensive Player of the Year is his to lose. They say that big time players make big time plays in big time games, right? Like, you know, the cliche. North Carolina Central versus South Carolina State was a big time game. Eric Phoenix, if you had any questions, I would say Thursday proved he's a big time player. So what kind of big time plays did he have? Because I would say you always have the Heisman moment, right? Like, that's what they talk about. This game, one of the biggest standout moments was Eric Phoenix absolutely obliterating a North Carolina Central defensive back. It was 3rd and long, and Phoenix goes to scramble. And I'm sitting here like, all right, he's not going to get it. There was a linebacker there, was a defensive back there. Phoenix said, okay, I see the weak link. It's the defensive back. I'm about what, half a yard short? I could go out of bounds. I could accept the tackle. I'm going through this guy. And he absolutely blew him back. It looked like some anime stuff, right? You ever seen them anime clips where people like, and they go and all that other stuff? Like, that's what it felt like to me. It felt like one of those ones where the anime guy gets hit, boom, and just goes skidding. Like, that's what that felt like, because you have to remember, Eric Phoenix is a quarterback, but in that play, he felt like he was a running back with the amount of power that he laid into that North Carolina Central defensive back. You have to understand that this award won't be official for a while. He could absolutely go off the deep end and everything changes. But what is suggested to me that he would go off the deep end? Like, what is there to point to say Eric Phoenix is not going to keep up his current streak? I would say nothing. But we will remember that play, right? Like even if he has an off day or whatever, he made a play in that North Carolina Central game that was so memorable, so impactful, that we will look back on this Central versus South Carolina State game, and that will be one of the defining moments, one of the defining plays in that game. Because it may not have been the very first drive. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it either set the tone or perfectly described the tone of the first half. And that was South Carolina State saying, we're just going to be more physical than you. I talked about the physicality battle being the key to victory for the Bulldogs. And I definitely feel like as if they won it, right? Especially in that first half. Central couldn't get any pass rush. Phoenix had all the time he needed to throw. I would say the running game wasn't great. So like that wasn't great. But then defensively, South Carolina State was getting after him, right? Like, they were getting after Walker Harris. They were getting after Jamari Taylor. Then, matter of fact, that wasn't even the only physical play that he had. Eric Phoenix also had a touchdown where there was 2 North Carolina Central defenders at the goal line. He decided to run through them. It was a closer one. He didn't blow anybody back. It wasn't as dramatic. It was no anime boom like type of play. It wasn't that at all. It was 2 men at the goal line waiting for Eric Phoenix, and Eric Phoenix saying, I have to get on the other side of you, even if it's barely. And he did it. Looked like it was near a fumble, but he did it. And those 2 plays, your quarterback going out there and making a physical play like that, that's going to get everybody going. Because when you're talking about the physicality battle, when you're thinking about winning the physicality battle, you are not thinking about your quarterback helping you win it. But that's what happened with Eric Phoenix. Eric Phoenix is your offensive player of the year. It's not just because he ran through a North Carolina Central defender, but that will be a standout moment. That will be on his end of the season highlight reel. That will be the play that we point to in that game of, oh, wow, look at what Eric Phoenix did. I've watched that play 4 or 5 times, and I may go watch it 3 more before I go to bed tonight. I'm not joking. That play was amazing to watch. But let's go beyond that play. Let's expand it, because one play does not make a game. One play can stand out in a game. Let's look at what he did overall on Thursday night. Eric Phoenix went 26 of 36 for 321 yards and 2 touchdowns. Then he ran 60 yards and had a touchdown on the ground. His vision was impeccable. On Friday, we talked about the wide receiver play and how Caden High was able to shift into another gear, and how Smith Brown and Carter, like, we talked about all of these guys and how talented that they are. But you do not see the consistency, the precision on a consistent basis in HBCU football frequently. You do not see it the way that he displayed it. I'm just being honest, right? When you look at what Eric Phoenix was able to do on a consistent basis, not occasionally here, not occasionally there, he wasn't off point on many throws. He wasn't. His ability to hit that 15-yard shot, his ability to hit the in-breaking route right where it needed to be, perfect ball placement, the amount of consistent precision that you saw from Eric Phoenix on Thursday, just simply you do not see in HBCU football frequently. This guy has been on a tear. I'll wrap it up with this. The 2 reasons that I genuinely believe that this game cemented Eric Phoenix's Offensive Player of the Year resume, I know it's not over, but I think it's cemented that he will be the guy, is number 1, he's been on an insane stretch. 4 of the last 5 games, he's thrown for over 300 yards. In 4 of the last 5 games, he's had over 3 touchdowns, whether that was 3 through the air, 2 through the air, 1 on the ground like it was on Thursday. This man has been insane. And listen, Eric Phoenix, 4 out of 5 games, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. He has an incredible wide receiving core. What is there to suggest that this man will slow down before the end of the season? Other than maybe you hoping. What is it? I haven't seen it. This guy's been incredible for the last month. And the second reason is I looked at this as Jamari Taylor versus Eric Phoenix as the leaders for the MEAC Offensive Player of the Year. Taylor had 77 yards and a touchdown. That's solid, but nearly half of his yards came on a 36-yard touchdown run. It was not easy sledding for him. It was a very difficult game. South Carolina State had the best run defense, or not had, it still does. They have the best run defense in the conference, and they showed why. Eric Phoenix, on the other hand, was constant. He was consistent. He was applying pressure. He was precise. He made a greater, more elongated impact. That's what I would say, right? It wasn't just a moment. It was moments. It was through the air. It was on the ground. Eric Phoenix was a constant presence, and he just played better. He played a better game than Jamari Taylor in a game that I came in saying could easily determine who's going to be the MEAC Offensive Player of the Year. And with the game that Eric Phoenix had, he snatched that. It's going to be difficult for Taylor to get it back, especially seeing that South Carolina State may end up winning the MEAC. Now, as we push forward and wrap up, let's keep it in the Mid-Eastern, right? Let's keep it in the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, because Morgan State's W was easily the biggest surprise of the weekend, and it's not the fact that they won. It's about how they did it. Let's break that down as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. And at FanDuel, you can put some money down on the NBA, right? I was just talking trash to a friend of mine about a little bit of NBA before I hopped on and did this recording. So make some money on the NBA. He was right. I was wrong. So don't listen to me. But you can, but you can make some money on basketball, on football, on hockey. It's still here, right? And you're looking at MVP odds if you're talking about further in the NBA, further in the NFL, or week by week, game by game, player by player. You have all of that. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, you name it, it's on FanDuel. Bronny James, LeBron James. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com. And if you're new to FanDuel, put down a $5 bet. You get $150 back in bonus bets. Just go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. This Morgan State victory was easily the biggest surprise of the weekend because if I would have told you that Morgan State was down 24-3, I think you would have turned off the game. And I almost did. If I would have told you that Morgan State won a game in a shootout, you would say, you sure? If I told you that Morgan State won a game in which the arm of their quarterback was extremely important, you wouldn't believe me. You for sure wouldn't project it to happen. If you say that you would, you're lying. You would not do that, okay? That's exactly what happened, though. Morgan State was down 21 points, and they came back. You don't think offense with them, right? And they did a lot of it with offensive scores. You did have I think it was a blocked field goal. The special teams have been amazing this year for Morgan State, but a lot of it was performing offensively, specifically the arm of Tahj Smith. I don't think that the box score is overly kind to Smith today. It depends on what you're gauging him off of. If you're basing it off of what he's done, oh, this is pretty good because this is his best completion percentage of the year. It's his most yardage of the year, right? But I think that if you're comparing him to a prolific passing quarterback, you're not necessarily enthralled. I'd say you wouldn't be enthralled. But think about this when I talked about their cousins. Mind you, the cousins of Morgan State is Alabama State. I think they're a little bit more well off. You know, they got out the hood. They're a little better well off because their quarterback is very impressive to me. But all I said is that they needed complementary offense. And that's all they needed. You can tell in the way that they move. They feel a little bit different out there for Alabama State. I feel like they gave us complementary offense in this Morgan State versus Norfolk State game. If I would have told you that Norfolk State lost to Morgan State, you probably would have told me, okay, Morgan State stopped the run and they kept the game low. That didn't happen. Kevon King had over 100 yards. I think he was in the 120s, maybe even the 130s. Score-wise, Norfolk State put up 37 points. I would say that the defense was much better than the 37 points suggest. Excuse me. First and foremost, that 24 points that they scored early in the game, a lot of that was based off of turnovers offensively. They didn't drive down the field for a lot of that. I think they drove down the field one time. The other 17 points were extremely short fields. You know, they had turnovers. They had fumble return for a touchdown. It wasn't necessarily the most impactful. And after that first 24 points that were, I think that might have been the first to second quarter, early second quarter maybe. Outside of that, Morgan State allowed 7 points through the rest of regulation. Then they allowed a touchdown in OT when you get 25 yards to drive, another short field. In general, Morgan State's defense was not as bad as it seems, but still 38 points was put on the board. 37 points was put on the board. You would not think that Morgan State is putting up 38 to win it all. But then you look at the arm of Tahj Smith, and Tahj Smith comes in and he was playing good offense. He was efficient. He had good completion percentage. And I'm going to go based off the eye test. The numbers, the stats, they give me what his completion percentage was and whatnot. But if you're solely talking about how he played the game, let me point to the last two possessions, specifically the last one in regulation and then the first possession of overtime. This was great play by Tahj Smith on the last drive of regulation because it was a minute and 41 seconds left on the clock. You're down 3. You have to go down and you have to get points. You don't have time for much running. You ran the ball twice. And both of those were Tahj Smith runs in which he either got a first down or he got out of bounds. This is smart football, situational, right? You got to think about these things. Other than that, it was passes. And I'm not saying he was airing it out 30 yards down the field to drive them down for a game-tying field goal, but it was consistent, steady offense. And sometimes you don't have to be flashy. Sometimes you don't have to be pretty. I done seen some clean tracksuits. They ain't the most flashy. They're not the biggest name brand and all of that, but you go ahead and get you a nice tracksuit. I got a nice tracksuit off Amazon. That joint is fly. I'm going to be honest with you. It looks really good. It ain't the flashiest. It's black. It's a black tracksuit, black jacket, black sweats, but it get the job done. And I'll be flying that joint, in my opinion, right? And that's how I looked at that last drive. It's the black tracksuit. It wasn't nothing flashy about what Tahj Smith did. It wasn't. It was a lot of utility. It was a lot of getting the job done. It was a thankless job, right? The one that you needed to survive. We needed to survive, but we don't necessarily think about the ones who are doing it. He didn't have a pass over 10 yards. But shout out to his teammates for getting out of bounds. They made sure that they had good time management. This is situational football, things that aren't sexy. And then overtime, he came out, boom, throws a touchdown. Game-winning touchdown. Tahj Smith played very well, coming off the bench, came in and led them to a comeback victory. You would not have expected that from Morgan State. You wouldn't have. Morgan State coming down or going down 24-3 was shocking, jaw-dropping even. But them coming back from 24-3, even more surprising. Now, as we push forward, or excuse me, on tomorrow's episode, we'll be back. We'll be breaking down some of the rankings because South Carolina State, by the time this comes out, you already know. But by the time this comes out, excuse me, when this is going on, when I'm recording this, I do not know. South Carolina State knocks off North Carolina Central. I don't see how they could be any lower than 2. That's actually where I expect them to be number 2 in the HBCU rankings. We'll see if I'm right. You'll probably already know by the time that you're hearing this. But in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that you're here to the family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.